At some point, and you remember when, you noticed it. The gatherings where you were present but not quite there. The conversations that moved fast and shallow while something in you waited, without patience, for something real to start. The friend groups that formed effortlessly around you while you observed them from a specific internal distance that you could not explain and could not close. The slow realization, confirmed across years, that your social world was smaller than most people's, and the quiet, persistent question underneath it: what is wrong with me? The culture has a ready answer. It says, you are avoidant, you are too intense, you have attachment issues, you need to open up more, be less selective, lower the bar, meet people where they are. The culture is performing a misdiagnosis. And the misdiagnosis is costing you the most important thing it could cost you: an accurate understanding of who you actually are. Because the psychology of social isolation is not a single story. It is at least two completely different stories, and most people never learn to tell them apart. There is the isolation of damage, of fear, of avoidance, of unprocessed wounds that make connection feel dangerous. And there is the solitude of the rare, of standards, depth, authenticity, and an internal complexity that most social environments were not built to contain. This video is about the second kind and the 7 traits that almost always produce it. If what you are about to hear describes you, understand something clearly. You are not broken. You are operating at a frequency most social environments are not tuned to receive. One thing before we go in. If you are not subscribed, do that now. Not because of a number, because this channel produces content that is easy to miss in the noise. And once you've heard something here, you'll want to be present for the next one. Subscribe and hit the bell. Now, 7 traits, starting with the one that causes the most damage to your social life and is simultaneously the one you are least willing to give up. Why the culture gets this wrong. The culture has a specific story it tells about social connection. That story runs roughly as follows. Human beings are social animals. Connection is a fundamental need. The measure of a person's social health is the size and warmth of their friendship network. Those who struggle to maintain friendships are either damaged, difficult, or deficient in social skills that can and should be developed. There is enough truth in this story to make it persuasive. Human beings are social animals. Connection is a need. Severe isolation does produce measurable psychological harm, but the story contains a significant error, one that does particular violence to a specific kind of person. The error is this: it treats all social difficulty as originating from the same source. It does not. Some social difficulty originates from fear, from trauma, from anxiety, from the distorted belief that connection is dangerous. This kind of difficulty responds well to therapeutic intervention. It is a wound, but another kind of social difficulty originates from something almost opposite, from excess of depth, of standards, of sensitivity, of self-sufficiency, or of an awareness of human behavior so precise that the performance required by most social environments becomes genuinely exhausting. This kind of difficulty is not a wound, it is a trait. And the 7 we are about to examine are traits that cluster reliably in the same kind of person. The one who has always stood slightly outside the warmth of easy social belonging, wondering what everyone else knows that they don't. They don't know something you don't. They need something you have less of. The need for shallow validation. 1. Pathological authenticity. Pathological authenticity is not a clinical term. It is the best phrase available for something that has no perfect name: the inability or the unwillingness to perform a version of yourself that is designed to make others comfortable at the cost of being true. Most people code switch effortlessly. They present a work self, a social self, a family self, a dating self, each one calibrated to the expectations and comfort levels of the audience. They do this automatically, largely without awareness, and experience no significant distress in the process. For the pathologically authentic person, this performance is not automatic. It is conscious, and it produces a specific kind of friction, a low-grade, persistent, internal resistance to being someone you are not, even when the pretense is harmless and socially useful. The result is predictable and painful. People at the level of casual friendship, the friendships most people maintain in large numbers, run almost entirely on mutual performance. You perform interest you may not fully feel. You perform agreement on things you may not fully believe. You perform enthusiasm for social rituals whose value you find genuinely difficult to locate. The pathologically authentic person performs these things badly or not at all. Not because they are unfriendly, they are often deeply warm at depth, but because the performance layer that most social bonds run on is not accessible to them at the same ease. What happens? The casual friendship never forms, or it forms briefly and collapses under the weight of too much honesty too soon, too little small talk, the unsettling experience of being with someone who is entirely themselves without the social lubricant that most people mistake for personality. The cure the culture offers is learn to perform better, be more socially agile, give people what they need. The sovereign response is find the people for whom your authenticity is not a burden, but a relief. They exist, they are rare, and they will be found only by the person who is willing to remain entirely themselves, while most others adjust. 2. An intolerance for superficiality. There is a specific experience that people who have this trait know intimately. You arrive at a social gathering with genuine openness. You want connection. You feel it as a need. You feel its absence as a weight. And then the conversation starts. And it is about nothing. It is about television. It is about mutual acquaintances and their minor dramas. It is about weather and plans for the weekend, and a shared contempt for Monday mornings. The people around you are clearly satisfied. They are laughing, relaxed, doing what humans are supposed to do in groups. And you are standing just slightly to the side of the experience, waiting for something to begin that never begins, leaving an hour later more depleted than when you arrived. The intolerance for superficiality is widely misunderstood, including by the people who have it. It is often interpreted as arrogance, as a belief that you are above the ordinary pleasures of casual conversation. It is not arrogance. It is a sensitivity to depth, a calibration of the nervous system toward meaning that makes the absence of meaning in conversation register as a kind of low-grade pain, like having a palate refined to the point where eating badly becomes genuinely uncomfortable rather than simply less enjoyable. The depth seeker is not looking for conversation that is intellectually sophisticated. The depth they need is not complexity. It is realness. The moment in conversation when the performance drops and someone says what they actually think, or admits what they actually feel, or asks a question they actually don't know the answer to. That moment can happen with anyone, at any education level, in any context. It requires only one thing: the willingness to be real. Most people in most social contexts are not willing. The cost of being real is too high, the risk of misalignment too uncomfortable, the maintenance of the performance too automatic to interrupt. And so the person with this trait accumulates very few social bonds, because they are waiting, in every conversation, for the moment that most conversations never reach. So 3. High internal standards that transfer outward. This one requires the most honesty to examine, because it contains both a genuine quality and a genuine liability, and the failure to distinguish between them causes significant damage. People who have few friends almost always hold themselves to high internal standards, in their work, their thinking, their commitments, their values. They have a precision about who they want to be and how they want to operate, and they hold themselves to that precision with a consistency that those around them often find quietly confronting. That is the quality. The liability is that these standards do not stay internal. They radiate, they project, not always through explicit judgment, often through the more insidious mechanism of expectation. People who spend time with a high standards person begin to feel, subtly but persistently, that they are being measured, that the conversation they are having is not entirely safe, that carelessness or inconsistency or a low moment will be registered and retained. They are not wrong. The high standards person does notice, not always critically, often simply observationally. But the noticing is real, and people feel it without being able to name it. The result is that relationships with high standards individuals require more psychological resource than the average friendship. People have to be more present, more consistent, more themselves, which is, paradoxically, exactly what the high standards person is seeking. But the effort of it keeps casual connection at bay. The shadow side, on which must be named honestly, is that high standards applied to others without compassion are not high standards. They are a defense mechanism. They are a way of ensuring that no one ever gets close enough to disappoint you at depth, because the bar for admission is set beyond what most humans can consistently clear. The sovereign application of this trait is this: hold your standards for yourself with absolute consistency, and apply them to others only where behavior directly affects you. For everything else, the practice is tolerance of imperfection in others that you would never tolerate in yourself. That asymmetry is not weakness. It is the discipline that makes the standard meaningful. 4. The capacity to be alone without being lonely. There is a distinction that most people never learn to make, because for most people, the distinction doesn't exist. The distinction between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the painful awareness of absent connection. It is a signal, the same kind of signal that hunger is, indicating that a need is unmet. It is unpleasant by design because it is designed to motivate you toward the connection you require. Solitude is something different. It is aloneness experienced not as absence, but as presence. The presence of your own thoughts, your own rhythm, your own internal world, undiluted by the demands and frequencies of other people. For most people, these two experiences are nearly identical. Alone is lonely. Aloneness is absence. The internal world, when not populated by others, feels thin and quiet in a way that is uncomfortable rather than nourishing. For the person with this trait, solitude is not thin. It is dense. It is a full internal environment with its own texture and depth that genuinely does not require external population to feel inhabitable. This is a psychological gift of the highest order, and it has a direct and significant social consequence. If you can be alone without being lonely, if your solitude genuinely nourishes you rather than punishes you, then your tolerance for social compromise decreases substantially. Because the alternative to social compromise for you is not the aching emptiness of loneliness. It is the quiet richness of your own company. This produces the pattern that many people with this trait misread as social dysfunction. They are available for connection, but genuinely unbothered by its absence. They will not lower their standards or suppress their nature in order to have company, because company at that cost is less appealing than the company of their own mind. The culture reads this as avoidance. It is not avoidance. It is self-sufficiency so complete that the ordinary social transaction, connection at the cost of authenticity, simply does not make the calculation. 5. Intense sensitivity disguised as detachment. This is the trait that people with few friends are least likely to recognize in themselves, and most likely to be recognized for by the rare few who get close. From the outside, the person with this trait often reads as detached, composed, difficult to affect, emotionally self-contained in a way that can read as cold, or as indifference, or as the slightly unsettling absence of the reactions that social situations normally produce. This reading is almost entirely wrong. The person who reads as detached is, in almost every case that matches the other traits in this list, among the most sensitive people in the room. They feel everything, and the detachment is not the absence of feeling, but the management of it. They feel the subtext of conversations with an accuracy that is sometimes overwhelming. They register the emotional temperature of rooms in ways that most people do not. They absorb the grief and conflict and need of people around them as if their nervous system has no filter. And they have learned through painful experience that expressing this sensitivity in unprotected environments produces specific and predictable consequences. It is used against them, or it overwhelms the other person, or it creates a dynamic in which they become the emotional custodian of everyone around them, the person everyone turns to for depth and care, who receives neither in return. And so the armor goes on. Not the armor of a person who does not feel, but the armor of a person who feels too much and has learned to be selective about where that feeling is safe to surface. The consequence for social life is significant. This person cannot maintain the casual, low-stakes bonds that most social networks are built on, because for them, nothing is fully low stakes. Every interaction registers, every insincerity produces discomfort, every moment of genuine connection produces an intensity of feeling that is difficult to calibrate down to the level of the casual. They are not cold, they are overwhelmed, and the detachment is the only tool they have found that allows them to be present without being consumed. The people who break through the armor, the rare ones who stay long enough and are real enough to see the interior, those people tend to stay forever. 6. The refusal to perform. Most human social interaction is performance, not in the contemptuous sense, no, not as a criticism of the people who engage in it, but in the precise structural sense. We perform enthusiasm, we perform agreement, we perform interest in things that do not interest us. We perform the emotions that the social script of a given moment calls for. The appropriate laughter, the calibrated sympathy, the enthusiasm for plans we find privately tedious. This is not deception. It is social lubrication. It is the oil that makes the machinery of human groups run without friction. And for most people, the performance is not experienced as a performance. It is simply how social interaction works. It is natural, automatic, and largely comfortable. For the person who refuses to perform, the experience is entirely different. They are aware. They see the performance, not because they are more intelligent than others, but because they cannot fully inhabit it themselves, which means they are always partly outside it, watching. And watching produces a kind of knowledge that participants do not have. They know which laughs are real and which are social lubricant. They know which agreements are genuine and which are peacekeeping. They know which expressions of interest are authentic and which are the polite maintenance of a conversation that has already run its course. This knowledge is socially expensive. It is difficult to fully invest in a conversation you can see the machinery of. Machiavelli, interestingly, understood this dimension of social experience better than almost any philosopher before him. He was explicit. The man who sees the game cannot fully play it the way those who do not see it can. Awareness costs something. It costs the innocent enjoyment of the performance. But what it buys, the ability to move through social systems with precision, to identify the real from the performed, to find the rare individuals who are operating beneath the script, is worth considerably more than what was lost. The refusal to perform is not a social failure. It is the price of social clarity. And social clarity, in the long run, produces fewer but far more enduring and nourishing bonds than the performance ever could. 7. An awareness of social dynamics that makes small talk unbearable. Small talk is often described as trivial, but that misses what it actually is. Small talk is a social ritual whose function is not information exchange. It is bond maintenance, the regular, low-cost repetition of signals that say, I am non-threatening, I acknowledge your presence, I am willing to share space with you on easy terms. For most people, small talk is experienced at face value. It is pleasant, low energy, and delivers its function invisibly. They enjoy it because they are inside it. For the person with this trait, small talk is transparent. They see what it is doing, the status negotiation in the topics chosen, the deference signals in the laughter, the territorial markers in the topics avoided, the careful calibration of how much to share and how much to withhold based on an unconscious social calculus that most people have never made explicit. This awareness is not chosen. It is not a philosophical position. It is a perceptual mode, the way their social cognition is tuned, and it makes small talk genuinely uncomfortable, not because they are above it, but because they cannot be inside it without simultaneously seeing it from outside. The dual awareness, participating and observing at once, is exhausting in a way that single-mode participants never experience. The psychological term for this is meta-awareness, the awareness of your own awareness. In social contexts, it produces the specific experience of watching yourself in a social situation while also being in it, which removes the effortlessness that makes casual interaction enjoyable. The consequence: small talk is not relaxing, it is work. The effort of being present, performing the required signals, managing the meta-awareness, and finding nothing in the exchange that reaches the depth the nervous system is calibrated to seek. This drains rather than replenishes. And when most social environments run almost entirely on small talk, when the depth-level interactions that would be genuinely nourishing are exceptional rather than standard, the person with this trait leaves most social environments having spent energy they did not recover. The practical implication: environments matter enormously for this type of person. The wrong environment is not simply unrewarding, it is actively depleting. The right environment, one structured around ideas, genuine problems, shared craft, or intimate depth, can be as nourishing as the wrong one is punishing. The shadow side. What we have examined today must not be permitted to become a comfortable story, and that requires naming what is true about the shadow side of these traits. Pathological authenticity can become an excuse to be difficult. If the refusal to perform a social self slides into the refusal to extend any social grace, it is no longer authenticity. It is the arrogance of someone who has decided that only their comfort matters in a social exchange. Intolerance for superficiality can become the inability to find value in any human interaction that doesn't immediately reach depth. But depth is earned. Most conversations begin shallow. The person who leaves before the depth has a chance to arrive has not found a superior standard. They have found an elegant exit from the discomfort of patience. High internal standards applied without compassion are not standards. They are walls. And the man who has built a social life of perfect walls has not achieved sovereignty. He has achieved safety at the cost of everything sovereignty is actually for. The capacity for solitude, taken to its extreme, becomes avoidance of the discomfort and vulnerability that real connection requires. If solitude is always preferable to connection, it is no longer a gift. It is a defense. And defenses, however elegant, are prisons of the self. The distinction, and it is the only distinction that matters in this entire video, is this: are these traits producing your social reality from a position of sovereignty, of deliberate choice, of genuine preference for quality over quantity? Or are they producing it from fear, from the avoidance of vulnerability, of rejection, of the specific risk that comes with letting someone real get close to something real in you? Both produce the same external result. Only you can audit the interior. The final reframe here is what this video has been building toward. The 7 traits we have examined: pathological authenticity, intolerance for superficiality, high standards that radiate outward, the capacity for nourishing solitude, intense sensitivity behind composed detachment, the refusal to perform, and the meta-awareness that makes small talk unbearable. These are not defects in a social animal. They are the specifications of a specific kind of person. A person built for depth rather than breadth. A person whose social needs are real but different, not larger or smaller than the average humans, but differently shaped. A person for whom the ordinary social transaction is simply not an adequate return on the cost of the performance it requires. History has not been short of this kind of person. Nietzsche, who wrote some of the most profound philosophy ever committed to paper, had almost no intimate friendships for most of his adult life. Kafka kept his writing secret from nearly everyone he knew. Tesla was famous for his preference for his own company over almost all others. Da Vinci's biographers note repeatedly the strange opacity of his social world. These are not examples because solitude is the price of greatness. They are examples because the traits that produce difficulty in social environments are often the same traits that produce the particular kind of inner life that does extraordinary things. The depth of inner life, the uncompromising standards, the sensitivity to nuance and meaning, the refusal to simplify the self for consumption, the awareness that sees through surfaces to the machinery beneath. These traits come at a cost. The cost is the easy warmth of a large social world that most people take for granted, and that you have always, at some level, envied from a distance. But the cost is not the diagnosis. You are not what is wrong with you. You are what is rare about you. And the people who will genuinely know you, the ones who will see the interior and choose to stay, will not find you despite these traits. They will find you because of them. If this video gave you a framework for something you have been living without a name for, understand that this is the public layer. Behind the join button is where the architecture goes deeper. The dark psychology of social systems, the Machiavellian frameworks for navigating environments that were not built for you, the mechanics of finding and maintaining the rare connections that this kind of person is actually capable of, without the constraints this platform places on content like this. The uncensored blueprints behind the join button. If you are ready to understand your social architecture at that level, click join. If this video described someone you know, or described you more precisely than you were expecting, leave a like, not for a number, because there is someone in your world right now who has spent years believing the culture's diagnosis, who has been trying to fix what is not broken, who has been performing and contracting and adjusting and wondering why they still feel like a stranger in most rooms. One like. The algorithm finds them. And if this channel is new to you, subscribe. We produce when the material is worth the architecture. The notification will tell you when that is. The Dark Lens. See you in the next one.